Can you guys hear me? I'm going to open this up on YouTube. I'm going to see if that lets people watch it live or not. So I go ahead and try and see if it does anything. I don't think it will. The YouTube version appears to be working. It's just a couple seconds behind. So if people use that, I'm taking it on. So you can say it's my normal voice, Jen. I'll move it closer once I start on the PowerPoint. You guys know if anyone's having one with the YouTube version. I just take the microphone and that kind of sound like. I'm watching the YouTube version of my house. It's lagging, but it's on. I have to explain what the 2020 is, right? Tell people if they go to the YouTube link, there's a way to Something pops up, a banner pops up that says be part of the conversation. And if you click on that, it seems to be YouTube itself some stuff. And, Hangouts. I told Megan I didn't know if it was going to work or not. So seeing it's on YouTube, it's just a couple of seconds behind. Other people are saying they can't get into it on YouTube. is. YouTube now, so hopefully it's working. I log off myself. Is the sound getting better? If you're watching this on YouTube, tell me to post a comment for me so I can see if that shows up in real time. So follow that too if there's any questions. I have a microphone closer. I don't have a separate microphone jack. Alright guys, tell me if this is better with it's almost trying to get started with this YouTube. They just won't be able to ask questions. I guess if you're viewing on YouTube, answer questions. See if that works. Well, you guys can still tweet at me on YouTube. From the start, that's how much I'm not. Give me a second. Stop muting me, stop. Is this any better? Is this any better, guys? Alright, let's just try this for a couple slides. It doesn't work. Try to start it now. Alright, so we're talking about War II. Some background here. It's the longest war in human history. It involves countries from around the globe. It involves colonies from around the globe. It involves all of the different territories that were held by the major European powers. And 70 million people are going to die. That includes civilians and military. We'll take a look at the military members that die towards the end here, and the civilians that die towards the end. The War is going to take place from 1939 to 1945. And there's three main causes for World War I. And the acronym to remember them by. The first is World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. And we're going to go over all of these individually. So if you have questions, you can ask them. The second reason it's going to start is appeasement. And the third is the rise of totalitarianism. More acronym here to remember. And today we're going to talk more about the European side of things, the international side. So with the Treaty of Versailles, you've got a lot of different countries that are the Germans who are particularly angry. Remember, they're blamed for the entire war. We're kind of talking about this. They're estimating modern day equivalent of $57 trillion for the damages that they caused. So it's an ungodly amount of money that they would never have been able to pay. People about whether they can hear better. Somebody on YouTube can tweet at me and tell me if the audio feed is better. I have a hard time hearing this on Hangouts. Or if you're on YouTube, leave a comment. It sounds like it's a combination of my terrible microphone and somebody who hasn't got the greatest speakers. Does that make sense? I'm starting to get into comments in this section. Okay, I'll just keep running through the slideshow. If you have questions, post them. If it doesn't work for you at all, feel free to leave, and we'll just figure it out from there. So we talked about the German side and the issues that they were having, and they're also particularly desperate. Desperate to anyone for leadership. Turning to for leadership. The Italians and Japanese are both angry from the Treaty of Versailles. Remember, they're not invited at all to the bargaining table, and they basically pick the Allies. And then, in addition to all this, the Allies are still in debt to the United States, and they're facing the Great Depression. So, if people start violating the Treaty of Versailles, the other Allies aren't going to do much about it. So, with this desperation for new leadership, you start to have a rise in totalitarian governments. And in a totalitarian government, you've got the state and the leader in complete control of everything. You have to listen to everything that they say. And with that, the state is always going to come first. Individuals will be second. And that means that individuals have no right to vote, they have no free speech. The government completely controls the economy. And usually just kind of devolves into a police state. So you're essentially living your entire life under martial law if you are living in a totalitarian regime. So here you have the four primary leaders that are involved in totalitarian governments entering the war. You see you've got the fascist Hitler and the Nazi Party. Germany. Then you have Tojo in Japan. Japan is basically a military dictatorship. Almost every civilian views themselves as a member of the military, which is where you're going to have the problems later in the war with the decision to drop the bomb. In Italy, you have Mussolini. Mussolini is actually kind of the first to start this whole fascist movement in Italy. Hitler is a great admirer of what he's doing. He tries to copy Mussolini and kind of takes it to a whole other degree. And then in the USSR, you have Stalin and the communist dictatorship. So within this, you have fascism in Germany and Italy. And fascism is all about the idea that the nation comes first and the individual comes second. You have to give everything that you have to your country, or essentially you are not a citizen of that country. Typically, they use a lot of filing means, as you'll see on the next slide, in order to keep people in line. And there's a big promotion of nationalism and a lot of racism involved, as we'll see in Germany. Again, it pretty much has to be a dictatorship. It has to be ruled with an iron fist. And as I said before, Italy is the first to do this, and then Germany somewhat copies it. So here you see some of the violent means that they use to kind of keep their people in line. If you don't do what they ask you to do, this is what's going to happen to you in these fascist and totalitarian problems. But if you are running a fascist or totalitarian government, you can get people to do things uniformly. That's the idea behind North Korea now. They control every aspect of life, so they can put on these great shows of unity, and people aren't necessarily united because they want to be united. They're basically united by fear. Prior to World War II, you're going to have the Spanish Civil War. And in the Spanish Civil War, you have the Republican government and the fascist nationalists, and they're basically fighting for control. Now they're democratic elements, but all of the allies from World War I are too engaged in isolationism to really do anything about this. So the Germans and Italians are going to prop up the fascist government in Spain, and they're going to take a look around, and they're going to see that no one has done anything about it. The United States, Great Britain, France all basically ignored what was happening. So Hitler is going to start just taking land when he sees what he's able to get away with in Spain. He says, "Well, if we're not going to stop me there, then let's see how far we can go." And the Allies, led by the British, follow a policy of appeasement. Appeasement basically means that we're going to give you whatever we want in order to avoid going to war. So Hitler basically starts demanding land that he says should be a part of Germany. Usually stuff that was given up in the Treaty of Versailles. And then Chamberlain just says, okay, and the picture at the top right is after Hitler's basically everything but Poland. Chamberlain meets with him and says, just, are you happy now? And Hitler lies right to his face and says, yeah, we're what we have. And Chamberlain claims that they have achieved peace in our time. Essentially, he believes that they were able to avoid war because Hitler told him that he wouldn't go to war anymore. So at the time of appeasement, 1939, on the eve of the war, this is what Germany looks like. The yellow are areas controlled by Germany that they've essentially just taken, and the Allies have given it up to them. Hitler's goals are militarism. Basically, he wants to violate the Treaty of Versailles. He wants to bring Germany back to its past glory. He also wants the Rhineland area. That's the small area in the darker yellow. Again, that was part of the Treaty of Versailles. That belonged to France, but Hitler just takes it. And he basically claims he's looking for living space. And he says it's living space for people that are German. So in 1938, he's going to basically annex Austria in Sudetenland. It's territory of Czechoslovakia, that's where Chamberlain just gives it to him. So once he gets that, he takes the rest of Czechoslovakia. And then from there, he's going to move on to Poland. And that's kind of the last straw. Scott, stop quoting Alabama songs. So, the start of the war. It starts when Hitler invades Poland. As soon as he does that, that's the same as going through Belgium in their mind in World War I. He says, Great Britain and France say that that's it. They declare war on Germany. And Germany decides we're going to invade France and Belgium again. France being the cheesy surrender parties that they are in 6 weeks. They're basically overwhelmed by the Germans. The French haven't spent a lot of time building up their military. They're more focused on trying to recover from the Great Depression, so they just give up. And again, they're done in 6 weeks. And Hitler invades Russia. The Russian invasion is kind of interesting because he makes a pact with Russia, a non-aggression pact with Russia. And then he turns around and invades them as soon as France gives up. So essentially, what he's done is avoided his two-front war that he was worried about with World War I, not him, but that the Germans were worried about in World War I. So once he knocks France off, he's able to turn around Connor, don't give me. If they aren't able to comment without an account, the best they're going to be able to do is either they might be able to use their Spalding account to comment. Otherwise, the best they're going to be able to do is either tweet at me, or they're just going to have to ask questions later. So for those of you using the Apple account, we're going to do the best that we can. Sorry, I'm trying to balance two screens at the same time. The German tactics here are the tactics that they use at the end of World War I, or that they attempt to use at the end of World War I, which is the Blitzkrieg. And this means lightning war in German. And the idea is that you quickly surround the enemy with an overwhelming force of tanks, and the troops come in trucks, so your troops aren't moving on foot. You're able to move more quickly and surround your enemy much more easily than if you oh, I see. They're worried about Ryan. They're worried about getting the credit. Yeah, tell them to take a picture and show it to me on Monday, or Friday. Hopefully not Monday, and we'll go from there. So Blitzkrieg also where we get our. And here you have a picture. This is Hitler in Paris. Nice little Parisian holiday after he's conquered the French. That's super in-depth for this for APUSH. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Holocaust. It's the Nazi plans to kill the Jews. This is Hitler's solution to make Germany pure, and he ends up murdering 6 million Jews over this time. And you got to remember, part of the blame, he thinks that if he got more help from the Jewish community, or not he, but Germany got more help from the Jewish community in World War I, Germany never would have had to surrender, and that would have worked out better for them. 5 million others besides the Jews are killed. This includes gypsies, the mentally ill, gays, as well as many Catholics, Catholic priests. Essentially, he just wants Germans in Germany and nothing else. So, can't do the math. 11 million total are exterminated, and this is not the first genocide, but obviously one of the biggest in our world's history. The idea of a genocide is when you try to exterminate an entire group of people, ethnic, religious, racial, or ethnic, religious, racial, whatever, for whatever reason you have, usually because you think that they are hurting your country or your religion. So here's just a quick lineup of who's facing who. Remember, there's also colonies, territories, and everything else involved in this. And this is the furthest that the Germans and Italians are able to take over in Europe. You can see they've taken a large chunk of Russia. They're into lots of northern Africa. France is following. Norway, Finland. You'll notice the Swiss, they stay neutral, and their neutrality is respected. And as you guys know, the war is not only in Germany, it's also fought in the Pacific, largely between the Americans and the Japanese. Other allied countries will lend support in this. We are the ones largely leading the charge. December 7th, 1941, that's the bombing of Pearl Harbor. In 2 hours, almost all of the U.S. Navy is completely destroyed. 2,000 sailors are killed. And this is what prompts us to join World War II as soon as we declare war on Japan. Germany declares war on us, so we're brought into both theaters at that point. And the war in Japan is primarily fought through island hopping. Basically jump from Pacific Island to Pacific Island fighting. It's incredibly fighting. The Japanese hold most of the islands, and they hold most of the high grounds. And in a war, when you hold the high grounds, you hold all of the power. So we're just going to go through these. Are just some pictures from Pearl Harbor and the bombing. There's debate over whether or not FDR was tipped off to Pearl Harbor happening. some intercepted messages from the Japanese that would have suggested that, yeah, maybe there is an attack imminent here. This is the USS Arizona. It's a national park. Sunken ship. If you ever get out that line. FDR's response to the Japanese bombing on December 8th is a day that will live in infamy speech. You all have probably heard this by now. If you haven't heard it, look it up on YouTube. The trademark of the speech is that December 7th, 1941 is a day that will live in infamy. This is his rallying cry to get Congress to declare war. This is also the last time in U.S. history that Congress has declared war. None of the other wars that we thought have actually been wars in the eyes of Congress or in the eyes of the Constitution. They've been more military, police exercises. So here is your Pacific theater in World War II. This is where all the fighting goes. Again, you don't need to learn any battles or anything. It's just what the Americans are up against. Naturally, we react to the Japanese in the United States. They are relocated and interred by order of FDR in 1942. They are sent to relocation camps. We'll watch a George Takei tomorrow. He was on the Daily Show earlier in the year, well, last year, this is 2015, and he spoke about what it was like to be, in one of those camps. Sorry, I'm a little too far there. And again, the reason that they turned Japanese, they could have easily done this to Germans, they could have easily done this to Italians. They look different. So they're more easy to identify and they're more easy to round up and lock up in these camps. Eventually, we are going to realize that probably we should have done that. There's a lot of soldiers that are actually fighting in the United States that have people back home in these camps. So we are eventually going to give reparations to these families across the United States, millions of dollars to try to right this wrong. And here's an idea of what these camps were. You can see that they're largely in the middle of nowhere, very similar to our Indian reservations. It's kind of just where the government puts people and we don't want to deal with them. The exclusion zone at the city, you want to make sure that there are no Japanese in that area, so they focus on rounding up people from those areas. This here is just a list of your American commanders during the war. You should really recognize are George Marshall. We'll talk more about the Marshall Plan afterwards. Yes, Scott, that was the Reagan administration that gave the reparations. Eisenhower, future president, is the Supreme Allied Commander. And MacArthur is taking care of things in the Pacific. He's going to be involved later on. George Patton is an interesting case in Europe. He's the leading general in Europe. He reports to Eisenhower. He's incredibly successful. Hitler very much admires Patton. He thinks that most of the Allied military leaders are actually quite weak. But when you talk about Patton, Hitler has a major admiration for him. And we'll talk about how that ends up backfiring on Hitler as we move through the end of the war. So, the war is going to end with Operation Overlord. As part of the Operation Overlord activities. This is the Allied invasion of France. And this is, if you've ever seen Saving Private Ryan, if you played the first Call of Duty, any of that stuff, this is what's being recreated. It's the invasion of France by all of the troops. Within a month of D-Day, there's 1 million Allied troops stationed in Europe, and the Germans are surrounded. You've got the Russians coming from one side, and the Americans and the rest of the Allies coming from the other. This here is the invasion of France. This is kind of the map showing it. And I told you about Patton. Patton uh, is sent home for a while to help to train troops in the United States. And while he's there, he meets a soldier who essentially has PTSD. They obviously didn't recognize what PTSD was then, but these were soldiers that were unwilling to fight, that were frightened by loud noises. Patton, when he encounters one of these soldiers, slaps him across the face, tells him to toughen up and get back to his unit. This does not play well in the American press. It's widely reported. When it is, Patton is removed from command. He's still left to train, but he's told to tone it down. And prior to D-Day, Eisenhower knows that Hitler has great admiration for Patton. And Hitler knows that the Americans, or Hitler thinks, the Americans would never invade without Patton. So Eisenhower brings Patton slapped the soldier with PTSD across the face, Mariana. So Eisenhower brings Patton back to Great Britain, and he actually sets him up at a base with a handful of troops and a whole bunch of balloons. And the balloons are tanks, army barracks, just all this stuff that makes it look like Patton is going to invade France from the narrowest point in the channel. So Hitler's admiration of Patton ends up backfiring completely, and the Allies invade at a different location than Hitler suspects. Hitler had moved a whole bunch of troops to deal with Patton, and it greatly helps the Allied invasion. So here, this is probably the most familiar image most of you are going to have of D-Day, with the troops invading the Americans. This is actually from Saving Private Ryan here. And again, this is kind of what this is what takes land, and you've got to remember, yes, God, it is the best movie ever. Even Shatner doesn't ruin that for people when they're watching the film. This is what the Germans are looking at coming ashore. You've got to remember, despite the overwhelming numbers that are coming on onto the beach here, the Germans still hold the high ground. So for the Allies to overtake this is quite amazing. Once the Allies do make landfall, the last major battle in Europe is called the Battle of the Bulge. It lasts 2 months. It's the final assault of the Germans. It's fought by a desegregated U.S. Army. Essentially, the soldiers almost desegregate themselves and get together for the fight. And this signals to the Germans that defeat is near. The Americans are closing in. The Americans and the Allies are closing in on Berlin from one side. The Soviets are closing in from the other. So in Europe, after the Battle of the Bulge, FDR is actually going to die April 12, 1945, of a brain aneurysm. Hitler, seeing the writing on the wall during the Battle of Berlin, is going to commit suicide on April 30th, 1945. And shortly after Hitler's suicide, we're going to have the surrender of the German army. It's said that as the United States and the Soviets are closing in, that the Germans would run to the Americans to surrender. They didn't exactly do nice things when they occupied the Soviets, and the Soviets are also not the nicest people, so they really don't want to get stuck in a Soviet POW camp. So the Allies end up dividing up Germany between them. Western Germany is taken by the Americans, French, and British. East Germany is taken by the Soviets. They do the same thing with Berlin. So Berlin is actually in Soviet territory, but they're actually going to divide Berlin in 4 too. So the Soviet-held territory is going to be Allied territory as well. The Nuremberg trials are the war crimes trials for the Germans. Most of the people running concentration camps are put on trial. Many put to death happens during the war. They're also going to seek to avoid the errors of World War I. When they get together, they don't want to be as punitive as they were before. They want to make sure that they try to build something up. They're going to bring in the United Nations. I almost said Model United Nations for my Model US Soviets. Jen, the Soviets got Eastern Germany and East Berlin. And this relates to the Cold War is essentially the democracies hold the West, and then the Soviets hold the East. And being in the Soviet-held territory, you have people under Allied control, under democratic control, living within this box. I'll go ahead to the next slide so you can see. Berlin is here. This is in the Russian zone. So you're going to have people under democracy living surrounded by the Soviet zone. So this is going to be one of the first clashes of the Cold War is what do we do with those people there once we stop getting along with Soviets, which it doesn't take long after World War II for this to happen. I think I should know just Germany surrendering does not end the war. Hopefully you guys recognize the Animal House photo because you've seen this at the Caps game during the Rock portion. Severe, I should say. So, meanwhile, in the Pacific, the Japanese and the Americans are still fighting. The Japanese are particularly brutal, especially when dealing with prisoners of war. And the culture in Japan is kind of this never say die philosophy. Rather than surrender, Japanese troops will actually blow themselves up with a grenade. They'll hide behind somebody that's dead and pop up and shoot troops when they get up close to them. So the Japanese with the POWs are going to lead them on an 80-mile march into better held Japanese territory. Thousands of prisoners are going to be tortured and die on this march, and many Japanese war officers are really going to be in trouble for their war crimes. The war in the Pacific, the United States is gaining the upper hand, and victory is probably going to happen, but it's going to come at a great cost of American lives and Japanese lives. So when Truman takes office, he learns of a secretive program that's been going on in the United States called the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project is a plan. They basically are in a desert, and they're building the atomic bomb. Truman doesn't even know about this when he takes office. FDR is very secret. And when he finds out that he has this weapon, he has to decide what he's going to do. Again, most Japanese civilians view themselves as members of the military at this point. Kamikazes are ravaging the U.S. fleet. Kamikazes, again, are pilots that would intentionally crash into U.S. boats, essentially committing suicide to sink an American boat. So Truman looks at Japan and says, we might have to use one of these weapons in order to, in the end, save lives. He decides to use the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A week later is what we call VJ Day, that's victory in Japan, and that is August 14, 1945. So the two bombs, the first is called Homeboy. That's the one that's dropped over Hiroshima. It explodes about 2,000 feet above a hospital in Hiroshima at 8:16 in the morning, and there's actually museums in Hiroshima where they have watches that were stopped when the bomb hit on display. The force equivalent of the blast is 12,500 tons of TNT. 140,000 die within 1945 as a direct result of the bombing, and then another 60,000 people die in the next 5 years over radiation poisoning and other issues with the bomb. The bomb over Nagasaki is called Fat Man. After we dropped the bomb in Hiroshima, Truman basically says, if you don't surrender in 24 hours, we're going to do something like that again. The Japanese don't surrender, so Fat Man is exploded at 11 o'clock in the morning on August 9th. Again, it's 1,600 feet off the ground, 22,000 force tons of TNT. A total of 170,000 people are going to lose their lives by the end of 1945 here, but 140,000 will die within the next 5 years from radiation poisoning and exposure. So here you can see where the two cities are located. We had to hit southern Japan because the planes carrying the bombs just wouldn't go that far. And the pilots carrying the bombs have no idea what's going to happen after they drop it. They don't even know if they're going to make it home. Here's a plane that drops the bomb over Hiroshima, the Enola Gay, along with a mushroom cloud and a picture of the bomb. This gives you an idea of just how devastating these things are. A standard missile is going to explode, with maybe a couple 100-foot blast radius. Here, your fire and blast damage are going to extend out 2,000 yards. So that's a 200 football field radius from where the bomb explodes. You can see you're also getting a radiation water supply here and other issues, and you're going to have blast damage out as far as 3,000 yards. So major impact when you drop one of these bombs. This is a before and after image of the bombing. You can see the top image right before the bomb was dropped. You can see all of the buildings there, and then when you look at the second image, that the two big buildings, the hospital, and the building behind it, in the top left of the picture, you can see they're just reduced to the foundation. They are essentially incinerated the second the bomb is dropped. And you can see this is again just kind of a wider angle look at Hiroshima. Just everything completely flat, no life anywhere. You can see some buildings do survive, but not many. Usually those are just kind of hollowed out shells of a building. Those are really left to them. More on Hiroshima. Here's one of the watches on display with the 8:15 stoppage time. The heat of the blast is going to be enough to melt glass bottles 900 meters away, so it's about a half mile away. And it's just it's a devastating impact when it hits. And the thing about the bomb, we're from the American point of view, and it's important to remember. There's a Japanese civilians that are impacted by this too, and the impacts are particularly brutal. You're going to end up with burns over most of your body, and this is if you survive. You've got radiation poisoning. Your clothes are going to burn to your skin before they burn off. It's an incredibly painful way to live if you die. I mean, you're basically living with exposed burns all over your body. These are some images of Nagasaki. Again, you have the before and after image, and you can see that that's yards, not feet, being measured in those circles. So at 2,000 yards, you have major damage and few buildings surviving. Here's another close-up of the image. So today in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they've built memorials. They've isolated the ground zeros. There's your Nagasaki memorial. 6 days after Nagasaki, the Japanese are going to surrender, bringing an end to the war officially internationally. There are still going to be Japanese troops on some of these Pacific islands that have no idea the war has ended. They're going to continue fighting for as many as 20, 25 years after the war is over, because word simply doesn't get to them that the war is over, or they refuse to believe that it's over and continue to fight. And this graphic is pretty telling for the toll that this war took. I mean, if you look at Poland, a large percentage of their pre-World War II population is going to be dead as a result of this war. And you can see on the Allied side how many civilians, even with the 2 atomic bombs being dropped, the civilian casualties are going to be relatively small due to the larger scope of deaths during the war. Then here we have, these are the 3 major conferences that you need to be familiar with that are held after the war. Yalta and Potsdam involved the United States, Great Britain, and Soviet Union. Yalta is essentially what they're going to do with war criminals. War criminals is going to set up the Nuremberg trials. Potsdam is how they divide up Berlin and what they're going to do with Eastern Europe. Again, they're trying to avoid what happened in World War I. And then the Potsdam Declaration, that's going to be with the Chinese involved, and that's going to outline the terms of surrender for Japan. So that ends our webcast at this point. If you have questions, you can either tweet at me or email me, and I'll try to answer them here in the next 10 minutes. Or if you are on the Google Hangout, you can post it in the comments section. So, any questions? Yes, Yalta. Yalta is how do we deal with war criminals, specifically in Germany and Japan. What are we going to do about them? Potsdam is about dividing up Berlin and what we do in Eastern Europe. So Potsdam, think more maps and redrawing maps. Yalta, think more bad guys. Any other questions out there? The Spanish Civil War, again, Hitler and Mussolini are backing Franco in Spain, the fascist side in Spain. And when Hitler sees that the Allies do absolutely nothing in response to that, that's going to embolden him to try to take more of Europe. Because he's seen that their isolation is almost to a fault, where they're just not going to do anything to stop him. Right, so if there's no other questions, if you're on YouTube, take a picture of you at the computer, make sure the time is shown in it, and just show me the picture tomorrow, and I'll give you the credit for participating. Those of you that are in here, a screenshot here, so I can see you. So I guess I'll sign off here. Thank you for spending your snow day with me. I know it was a little hectic at the beginning. Hopefully you guys got something out of this, and I guess I'll see all of you tomorrow. Make sure you take your Period 7 vocab quiz.